What if the most life-altering injuries aren't visible at all? Long after the bandages come off, many accident survivors are left wrestling with silent battles, anxiety, fear, and confusion that no x-ray can detect. I'm Kiley Como, legal nurse consultant here at Shane Smith Law. Today, we meet Yissi Steinburg and Ami Feindstein, founders of Shefa Mental Health. Yissi and Ami reveal what's often missed beneath the surface, how early support can change recovery, and how the vital role of documentation for healing and justice. This conversation explores emotional warning signs, invisible wounds, and the power of timely help. Yissi, Ami, it's great to meet you today.
Great to be with you, Kiley. We're super excited, and I think you hit the nail on the head, man. It's all about those injuries that are hard to see. It's not like a fracture that shows up on an x-ray, right? There's a lot that goes on up here, so amazing. We're glad to be here.
Yeah, the brain is a mystery. Yeah, we're excited for this one. We have a wide, diverse audience. I hope you buckle up. This is going to be some pretty rich content, so let's get into it. Guys, can you kind of describe, let's dig into the emotional side of things. Describe the range of emotional responses that many people might experience following an accident or a traumatic brain injury, even if their physical injuries might appear minor or even fully healed.
So, Kiley, first, I'd like to thank you for having us on your podcast. We love what you do and you bring it out there to the masses. In order to answer your question, I think there's really three main responses that people will have emotionally to an accident, and it kind of corresponds to flight, fight, or freeze mode that your nervous system will go into. And the nervous system is what we are basically dealing with in the majority of the cases with our clients. It's how the nervous system kicked in post the accident. So whether that's a flight mode that the client will decide to totally go into, or a fight mode, or a freeze mode. So depending on the reaction of the nervous system, that's how the client will respond to the accident.
Yeah, that fight, flight, or freeze. We hear that so often, and you never know what you're going to get until it happens to you. We love to kind of include our audience on these things. So I'd like to pose a question to the audience. For those of you, especially those of you who have been in a motor vehicle accident or maybe have experienced maybe a mild traumatic brain injury or worse, did you experience noticeable changes in your emotions? What did that look like in your day-to-day? Please share in your experiences in the comments below. Guys, what are some of those, maybe let's say subtle or less obvious signs of emotional trauma that people really commonly overlook, maybe in themselves or after a loved one who's had a brain injury?
Absolutely. Kiley, if I can just piggyback on kind of that first question, if that's okay. Yissi did a great job explaining. I like to say it's kind of a roller coaster of emotions. There's that initial shock of being in a car wreck, like, oh my God, and a lot of times those wrecks are catastrophic and they're suffering, severe injuries, God forbid, or just the shock of like seeing your car totaled and being in a traumatic event like that. It can definitely shake you up and rattle you a little bit. So there's that initial shock that people go through. And then if God forbid they're suffering from injuries, I'm nursing a bad back right now. And, when you're in pain, it's hard to focus on everything else. It's depressing. I can't pick my kids up, I can't exercise. It really affects like other aspects of your life. Humans are very complex beings. We're not just a body, we're a mind and a body. So those definitely tie into each other. And then just when you're in a wreck, it just kind of turns your world upside down. You're stressed about how you're going to get to work. You're stressed about money. And when you're stressed, it can be difficult to focus on, getting to your doctor's appointments, to your pain management doctor, to your ortho, or, your chiro, whatever, all these things. Stress affects everything. It affects your sleep. It affects your diet. You might not eat it. You might not be present in your interpersonal relationships. So we find that, mental health is not near as taboo as it was a few short years ago. And for sure, thank God, attorneys are really kind of jumping on that and seeing, the importance of treating the mind as part of the body as well.
Yeah, I'm so glad you brought that up, you guys. So a lot of stuff there. So, you talk about the stress affects the diet and so on. So, and it's this vicious kind of cycle, because the stress affects your diet, but if you don't eat well, it can make stress worse. And it's just this topsy-turvy, you said it, it's chaos. And then throw those physical injuries on top of that. on our side of things as a personal injury firm, and me as a registered nurse and our treatment coordinator, the legal nursing side of things, we really want to push our clients to treat those physical injuries, obviously, because those are the big obvious injuries. But in the background, when you have these, again, mild TBIs or worse, you do have these emotional responses, these psychiatric or emotional or spiritual needs that need to be attended to, because that in turn also, it's this vicious circle. If you don't attend to those, you're not going to treat your injuries very well because you're depressed. And it is a tough situation to be in after an accident. It's all turned upside down for sure. Brain injuries are tricky in general, right? It's the silent injuries, if you will. Why might some people seem fine on the outside, yet be struggling significantly with these emotional challenges that we're talking about beneath the surface?
We have a tendency to compensate. So if somebody gets in a car accident, and maybe they didn't get physically hurt so badly, and even if it wasn't such a large accident, such an intense accident, the traumatic injury, what the brain processes can be much greater than what actually happens. We had a client, and she was stopped at a red light, and a car came and barely impacted the car. There was very little damage. She had not so much physical damage, just a small fracture. And a couple weeks later, she's sitting at the grocery store, and she's like overwhelmed about having to put her stuff back in the car, have to get back in the car, have to drive, like, what's going on? And then she kind of remembered she didn't even do anything about the accident. She remembered, like, hey, maybe this has to do with the accident, and it's kind of how the brain processes things. Is in that moment when that car hit her, she didn't know, she lost control. She thought, like, hey, this is bigger than what it is. So kind of what we do is try to recalibrate that and to retrain our clients to be able to get back into the car and to not have to think like, hey, right now I'm safe.
And Kiley, you're a nurse, so I'm sure you see in your experience, you triage, and there's an order of priorities, right? You got to stop the bleeding before you address like a minor wound. So a lot of times people will focus on those physical injuries, right, and kind of like poo-poo mental health for a little bit, and it doesn't manifest right away. It could be festering in the background. Somebody might have crying episodes, or they're anxious when they're in the car and they might not put it all together. We see a lot of gentlemen, and I know this might not be P to say, you might have to edit me out, but men, like, we kind of don't like to talk about our feelings necessarily so much, right? We kind of like push it down a little bit. I can tell you, even in my own personal life, my wife's like, you need to open up more, talk more. I'm like, okay, I get it. But like, yeah, it really is important to like have somebody that you have rapport with, that connection with, and be able to talk about your emotions, and just getting it all out there is very, very important. But it's hard. Even though we've come a long way as far as mental health goes in our society, we still have an uphill battle to fight, for sure.
Yes, so very true. You're touching on like a PTSD scenario. Sounds like we see that a lot. You see that a lot in military veterans who have been, especially those that have been through combat. Very similar responses in those ways. And I like what you guys are talking about. Sometimes the client or the patient doesn't even connect the dots, if you will. So, we're hoping that our providers, even the attorneys, are picking up on some of these things and connecting those dots, so to speak, and getting those clients, those patients, with the right providers like yourselves at Shefa, to be able to start mending some of those unseen, injuries with the emotions, the mental status, all that sort of thing. So very, very important call outs there. Speaking directly to our audience here, right, what are some of those key emotional or even behavioral red flags, we'll say, that might signal someone may need some professional mental health support after an accident or an injury?
So I would say the main overlooked symptoms in a traumatic brain injury is irritability, like low tolerance, concentration issues, sleep changes. Somebody like will stop socializing, or they will be more hypervigilant. They will be more careful than they usually would be. And these are things that most people will just overlook, and they'll say, it's just temporarily. But I would say that the earlier they get treatment, the less of a problem it becomes in the long run. the less it just builds on top of the fear and the irritability and the sleep issues and the voice. That stuff builds up to a point where it's just, the lid's just going to blow at some point, and it's going to turn into a major issue. So we're trying to get our clients treated as soon as we can, so that those issues do not blow over to something more severe.
Yeah, and for those of you listening, that this is an important concept to really understand, especially if you're the loved one of somebody who's suffered an injury like this, or even their attorney, or their provider. You've got to be their advocate. You've got to notice those things when they come up, that this is not John or whoever it is. This is not the way they normally are, and get the ball rolling and get to that early intervention. Just like the body, got to have that early care and treatment, or else those injuries don't heal correctly. The mind is no different. The mind and the emotions are no different, correct?
Absolutely. Yeah, you hit on a key point, Kiley. The importance of intake and that legal team and asking the right questions. So many times it's out of sight, out of mind. But, Yissi and I, we always say, if they're having trouble, sleeping, eating, irritability, like Yissi touched on, if the car was totaled, that's traumatic. If the airbag was deployed, these are all signs that somebody most likely is suffering from some sort of mental anguish, and would benefit at the very least from having that initial session to see if there is, a true diagnosis of, one of these mental health.
Yes, absolutely. So key. We here at Change Smith Law almost always try to get our clients connected with mental health providers when it's needed. You've got to deal with things like limits and things like that, but hopefully there's health insurance involved if the limits don't allow for it. So yeah, we really see that as a very important part of the overall case and treatment. So again, so excited to have you guys on. Let's dig in a little further into that, because, and you guys have already mentioned it, some of these things are a little bit delayed in their onset. So why are these delayed emotional responses so common after these traumatic events?
I think the reason that the reactions are delayed, the brain is trying to catch up to what's going on. The brain can only process so much. And to the brain, what happened was so great, and so there's so much to process, that it still hasn't caught up yet. So that's why you'll have symptoms only showing up weeks later, only because the brain's just not there yet. I just got back from traveling. I went to Israel for a week, and it was an action-packed week. I had a wedding, and I had a lot of friends to see there, and a family, and it was nonstop. It was just seeing people, doing things. When I got back, I was like, did I just go to Israel? Like, was I there yet? Like, I'm still like getting on the plane to go. Like, I haven't come back yet. So the brain works in the same way. It can only process things as fast as it can. And so that's why, you'll have a client that 3 weeks later, the real symptoms really start kicking in. And that's something that we monitor in treatment, is changes. And we'll check in with the client. When the client comes in, we'll right away we'll do a diagnostic assessment. And oftentimes, it'll be within a week or 2 weeks of the accident. And to be honest, we're not going to be able to catch everything at every eval if we're only evaluating them a week or two after the accident. So that's why we kind of check back in. Let's look into the symptoms. Is there hypervigilance? Is there concentration issues? And then we kind of get the whole picture into their treatment, so that we could treat the entire issue.
I think that's a purposeful design, in my opinion, right? You're right. We can only handle so much at one time. And I think that is a gift from above, that we aren't just deluged with all of the things all at once. Our brain kind of filters some things. Let's take care of a few things first. And then, unfortunately, those emotional responses will start to filter in, but we don't have to shoulder all of the burden all at once. So it can kind of be a bit of a godsend, if you will. But yes, the delayed response is very, very common. We see it a lot in our cases as well. I'd like to ask our audience, again, especially for those of you that have experienced traumatic brain injury, a motor vehicle accident or some such, did your emotional upheaval come on all at once, or was it delayed too? How did that play out in your day-to-day life? Please, again, share your experience in the comments below. Fellas, In what ways kind of do accidents typically disrupt daily life, we'll say, or let's talk about even relationships, work, just that general well-being, even if physical recovery seems to go really well?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, in cities like Dallas, I'm sure, Charlotte, you rely so much on your car to get from point A to point B, right? It's not like, New York City where you've got public transportation everywhere. So that's certainly like, a wrench in things right away, to have to take an Uber or to try and bum a ride from a buddy you work with, or to get your wife who's also doing carpool and going to soccer practice. So, there's a certain level of stress associated with that. And then just like, if you can't work, that's stressful too. Am I going to get fired, God forbid? A lot of people are living paycheck to paycheck. They need, that money. So there's the financial strain of that, and again, this can kind of all just snowball into keeping you up at night and, not being able to connect with your partner or your kids or be present at family events. Like, it's all intertwined and intermingled, and it all comes from that, that car wreck, and it's definitely difficult.
Oftentimes a car wreck, it's kind of a rude awakening that, people think that, we're in control of our lives and we got everything put together, and then, we get sideswiped and, we realize that we're not really in control, and things can change drastically after a car accident, financially. We can't get to work, and physically, and a lot of our clients, the work that we do with them is kind of dealing with that loss, or the thought control that they had before, and to really regain the control that they had over their lives, and to reestablish themselves in society the way that they were before the car accident.
Yeah, it's a long process, right? Yeah, you mentioned some really great points. Your car is smashed up, you can't drive to work, you're not going to get paid, you won't make bills. I mean, there is immediate stress and big stressors coming at you right at the moment of that impact. And I'm so glad that we have teams like you out there help kind of get our clients, our patients, our loved ones really, back at it and approaching life with some positivity. So you mentioned that initial evaluation. What does you at Shefo, how does that mental health evaluation usually look to you guys? What does that involve?
In our evaluations, we are typically looking for the most common symptoms, and those are obviously PTSD, anxiety, and depression. And we use different measuring tools, the PCL5, the GAD-7, the PHQ-9, in order to assess for those things. On top of that, we find it's very important to kind of get a real comprehensive history in order to understand how the client's history really plays into how they are experiencing the aftermath of the wreck, today. So I think that's very important. We want to look at a kind of from a holistic point of view. What are they doing on a day-to-day basis, and what were they doing before the car accident, and what are they doing today, and kind of see how that shifted. And together with all those, also family, I think, is also important. What does your social life look like? What does your support system look like? Putting all those together, we kind of, we'll get a diagnosis. And what's more important, and I wouldn't say more important, but just as important, is that it helps us create a real wholesome and holistic treatment plan. And I'm not, and you're meeting with a therapist once a week, which is great, sometimes twice a week, but just as important is the client's participation in treatment outside of the therapy. So that's why we look at all those things, so that we can create a plan for them to, if they're not socializing, if they don't have the security, the social support that they need, to go get the social support. If they're not exercising, to go exercise, because these things are very important in the recovery of trauma, is really taking care of yourself totally in terms of, all those things, including, and I think, one thing I do tell all, we speak about with all of our clinicians, is getting clients to exercise. Because movement, when you move your body, that creates shifts in your brain, positive shifts in your brain. The more you move your body, The more you sit on your screen and you don't move and you just scroll through your phone, through your TikTok, watching TV, not being productive, that'll impact your recovery from a traumatic injury. So,
yeah, I'm sorry, and I just wanted to kind of to add to that, that we use objective diagnostic tools like Yissi touched on, the PCL5, the GAD7, the PHQ9, things like that to usually yield a diagnosis of the PTSD, anxiety, depression, or some sort of generalized anxiety disorder. But we also realize too that our clients are individuals, that they're very unique. You can't put a ball through a square hole, right? So we're having to individually tailor things, and you use these objective diagnostic tools. But then you take on the other factors, like Yissi talked about, like the family, the social, job, history, all these things tie together and kind of make these people who they are and tell their story. And then we're having to build, a treatment plan based on that. So it's different for everybody, but that, initial psychiatric evaluation is so key. That's the foundation for the rest of the treatment, for sure.
I'm so glad you guys, both of you, touched on that very well. Audience, pay close attention to that. If you're currently in treatment and you're not feeling like an individual in that, there's something wrong. Yes, these standardized tests, these diagnostic tools are extremely important. However, that's not the end of it. As the guys mentioned here, it's that individual, comprehensive, kind of digging deep in more or less a conversation to figure out who you are. It may involve family, you said, I think I heard, to get outside perspective. Very, very important, audience. So make sure that you're seeing that in your own care. And if you're not, I would ask some questions about that. Guys, we are right up against time. So I hate that I have several questions, but I do have one more question for you. And it's concerning a critical area of importance to all of us, documentation. How does thorough documentation help both the client and their legal case, from your perspective?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, documentation is key. They say if it's not on paper, did it even happen, right? It's so important to dot those I's and check those T's, for sure. I mean, the documentation is key, and that's something that we really stress to all our clinicians. They all have various backgrounds, but they're all very well versed in the types of trauma common to personal injury. So that's something the notes are always geared to. We really try and we understand that, trauma is very complex, and that, if somebody, God forbid, experienced a childhood trauma, that they may have thought they dealt with, they could be in a car wreck later on, and it could trigger that trauma too. It's all very connected. But we try and make sure that, the documentation really focuses on the trauma that they're there for with us, which is the car wreck or the dog bite or med mal, or a handful of other things. But yeah, those notes are key, absolutely. And I'm sure Yissi can talk more about that from a clinical perspective.
Aside for helping the client in their case, which is very important, and keeping track of things, I think it's important to just see the progress of the treatment. That's one thing that we try to focus heavily on, is from week to week, is really just showing hey, last week, you said that you were here, and now this week we see this kind of progress. And we'll always have our clinicians ask their clients, what are you doing this week that you couldn't do last week? What kind of perspective are you seeing this week that you couldn't see last week? And that really helps them progress and create a kind of flow in their treatment to be able to heal and recover from
narrative,
that.
Really, yeah.
You guys are killing it. You are speaking my language. That is exactly what we like to see. Both sides, the clinical aspect backed up by solid documentation. I mean, you got to have them both, audience. Thank you for touching on that. Documentation is evidence, but it's also that not only evidence in your case, but evidence that you're getting better. And as Yissi and Ami have mentioned here, you need to be doing both. So guys, amazing, fantastic. We are up against time. Everyone, that's going to do it. It's a heartfelt thanks to Yissi and Ami today for shedding light on the emotional fallout of accidents, these often overlooked warning signs, and really the hope that comes with proper support. This discussion, I think, is a powerful reminder that true and full recovery goes far beyond stitches and scans, and that tending to our mental health is just as essential as treating the body. We want to thank you guys for listening. Join us next time. We're going to sit back down with the guys and dig into what clients are really saying in those first few days and weeks after an accident, and how Shefa makes it easy to get care quickly, and why close collaboration between the legal team and the mental health professional can completely change the outcome of a case. If today's conversation hit home with you, we would love to hear your experience. Please share your story of navigating life after your own brain injury, and how that might be able to help others in similar situations, and also help us develop future episodes. If you would, please like this episode, subscribe to our channel, and share it with someone who might need to hear it. It's your engagement that helps us bring more experts like Yizanami and more meaningful conversations to Mind Matters. And please remember, if you're in pain, call Shane at 980-999-9999. Take care.
In pain, so I call Shane. 980-999-9999. In pain, call Shane.